Might be quicker and easier to deal with the McIlroy piece firstly then. That's on page 11 of the Sunday Times. A lot of Sunday Times stuff today, actually.
Yeah, a lot of good stuff in the Sunday Times today, yeah.
So Dennis Walsh, clinical final round performances have deserted the former world number one. There was a time when Rory McIlroy was doing brilliant things in final rounds. His first win on the PGA Tour at Quail Hollow, he shot a course record 62 to come from behind, and he's gone out as well over the years in final rounds, in closing rounds, or in closing part in pairings, like the British Open jumps to mind when he won in 2014, and he sealed the deal. But there is a sense over the last 18 months that final pairings have not worked out so well for McIlroy. So what's prompted this is he was in the final round, in the final pairing, in the final round with Gary Woodland at the Tournament of Champions in Hawaii, McIlroy's first event of the year, and he went out, and if you watched it, he never even threatened. Ultimately, that tournament was won by Xander Schauffele, who shot a 62, which was a brilliant round, but McIlroy shot a 72, which was basically the joint second worst round of the day, and there was no wind. It was not a difficult course.
He started well. He's 1 under through 3 or 4,
and it just he just couldn't hold a putt. He was still hitting the ball reasonably well, but no charge came. In isolation, you would say that can happen, but it's part of a slightly wider trend now, and Dennis Walsh has been digging into that trend.
This is a small piece at the top of page 11 in size, but I just think it's such a brilliantly written and researched piece. And for me, it kind of sums up everything that I would ask about Rory McIlroy as a casual golf watcher, what's going on with him. And he starts off with the interview he gave after round 3 last weekend, which I saw at the time, and I was kind of thinking the same thoughts on it. You know, Rory was talking about how when he was in Sunday groupings before, he was chasing too much and he was too gung-ho. So he was talking about how much he'd learned, and I'm going to just be patient and do my own thing. And then, like you say, Joe, he goes out and he shoots that, and you're going, what is this about? This is a guy who was so electric on a Sunday for so long. I mean, he won his majors, he was doing everything. And there's a lot of stats in it that Dennis has really digged into really well. But the one I think that stood out for all of us is McIlroy's cumulative score for those 9 rounds in Sundays where he's
final pairings.
Only one of those rounds was sub 70, and he says, with those numbers, what chance do you have? I mean, that to me really, really does sum it up. And he goes into a couple of instances where he was in touch, and even with Molinari in one of the tournaments, and this was before Molinari became the Molinari, the Open winner, and a guy who himself had a reputation for cracking down the stretch, and Molinari beat him. And the key for me in this article is the last 2 columns where he talks about at this stage you wonder how much of the difficulty is in McIlroy's mind, and he talks about how he's always been wary about sports psychology. He worked with Bob Rotella for a very small period of time, and it just struck me that, you know, McIlroy has always from the outside in seemed to take things on by himself. You know, he ended his relationship with Chubby Chandler, with Connor Ridge. He's got rid of his caddy, and he's always given me the impression of a guy who was just too within himself, too singular, not open enough to other ideas. And this just fits in perfectly with it. It's a beautifully written piece. There's not a wasted word in it.
Yeah, it's tight. Really tight, yeah. Because I had heard people make the point during the week that in fairness to McIlroy, in a lot of those pairings, he was 2 or 3 shots behind, and he was generally against players in the top 20, 25 in the world. So it's, you know, it's not easy, and we're talking about the elite of the elite. But the stat which I must say struck me was that of those 9 rounds, only one of those rounds was sub 70. Yeah. So that is actually a problem with McIlroy.
It's astounding, isn't it?
Well, I think, listen, with nearly all sports, and someone who's not probably, you know, winning, you look at was it technical, tactical, physical, or mental, and you'd have to say, you know, he's one of the best natural strikers of the ball. So it's not technical. Tactically, I'd imagine he has the experience now to be making good choice selection. Physically, he's probably one of the fittest in it. So the last box to tick is the mental, and the fact that he has been quite shy about tapping into help in that area might be just the push he needs to get back winning again. You know, but listen, by all accounts, golf is one of the hardest games in terms of self-belief, mental strength, confidence, and it's probably shocking that he hasn't, you know, added that extra layer. Even if it's a case of just ticking that box and making sure you're leaving no stone unturned.
Because Dennis says he met once with a sports psychologist, and he met with Bob Rotella as well. But insofar as we know, that's about the height of it.
Yeah, you know, John Duggan was talking earlier in the week about was it Harrington? He was saying was Ireland's best ever sportsman because he made the most of himself. Now, that's not an opinion I agree with, but I see where John's coming from. And if you look at Rory McIlroy, it's nearly the opposite at this stage. He's clearly not getting the best of himself.
Yeah.
And in being open or not being open to other influences, I mean, there's elsewhere, even the bottom of the same page in the Sunday Times about Andy Murray, who, in my opinion, again, is wrongly being described as the greatest British sportsman of all time. But that's a guy who's been open to new ideas, so much so that he got Amelie Mauresmo to be his coach. And people are saying a female coach for a men's player. So that's a guy who was breaking out of the box and looking at different ways of doing things and doing things that others didn't think. And McIlroy just strikes me as a guy who's the opposite way, that maybe he's not open enough. Maybe he's too used to doing all these things himself and taking too much on board. And we've seen now he's ditched Europe, basically. You know, his Irish Open commitments are gone. So you can see that he's getting rid of everything in the exterior, and he's concentrating, what do I have to do to win more majors? And maybe he just doesn't have enough people around him to step out and say, well, here's just an idea.
Yeah.
What do you think about this?
Well, it seems even so. Look, the elephant in his room, the elephant in the room as well, is his putting.
Yeah.
And the word, fairly reliable word, was that, you know, he hooked up with Brad Faxon last year, who was an excellent PGA Tour putter, one of the best ever, you know. And they met each other at the local golf club where they both lived. They happened to run into each other and they got talking, and Faxon gave him some tips, and it really helped him for a couple of weeks. But even then, the suggestion seemed to be that it was casually suggested, Rory, why don't we head to the golf club around this time today and play around? And maybe it wasn't a total coincidence that Brad Faxon happened to be waiting, that almost bringing those two together had to be done, or even that had to be done with an air of coincidence, as opposed to, look, I hate to tell you, but you're about 200 in the world and you're putting, and you need to go and see someone. So he is in charge of his own ship. He's left two different agents. He's left his caddy behind. Really, his coach, Michael Bannon, is the only one who's survived this far. And even towards the end of last year, we saw Rory taking advice from another coach. So you do wonder who he listens to. That would be a very interesting thing for us all to really know. Who gives you advice that stops you in your tracks and makes you think, okay, I'm going to change things here.
Yeah.
The putting is a problem. It's a massive problem. And on Sunday, he couldn't hold a putt. He didn't hold a single putt outside 15 feet all week. You think about that.
Wow.
The longest putt he held on that Sunday, just gone, was from 4 feet. So look, that is an issue. We would be disappointed if we had those stats. That is an issue. However, he is at the moment managing to play well enough, even with the putting on the Thursday, Friday and Saturday, to put himself in final pairings.
Yeah.
So it's not just the putting.
And he's won majors with his putting before, so you know.
There probably is something else. So I don't know, it's endlessly complicated.
It must be very hard though for if you've been a child prodigy and everything's been easy for you to a certain extent, then to put your hand up and say, oh, I need help, and then to understand how to take that on board, how it integrates with your natural game and your natural instinct. But it looks like, he does potentially now, his career hasn't kicked on to the level that we all probably expected or hoped, so he potentially does need to look at different people who can help him.
Well, in 2014 he won the British Open, won a WGC and won the PGA, so 2 majors and a WGC in the space of about 4 or 5 weeks. 2014, 5 years ago, he was 24 years old with 4 majors, and had just won those 2 on the bounce at 24. So if you, in your 2014 Christmas review, had said, you know what, I think we're going to be sitting here in half a decade, and he wanted to win another major, you would have been laughed out of the room. He was set to be the Tiger Woods.
Listen, there's some theory that the vast majority, 99.9% of human beings that have this creative explosion that only lasts a certain amount of time, you know, whether it's music or any sort of arts and sports. Are we looking at McIlroy just in that vein? You know, like you said, it would have been ridiculous to even suggest that, but I mean, time is ticking on.
It is ticking on. And Harrington, long ago, was saying around that time that it was Rory's time to make hay, because the next generation of college kids in the US would be able to hit the ball as far as, which was his great strength.
Yeah.
And now we are seeing, now look, he's still, and the signs were very good at the weekend, he's still maybe the best driver in the world on his day. But there is just that advantage he had is not as fast. And on the greens, they're all way ahead of him. So you would actually, as ludicrous as it is to say about McIlroy, or it sounds to say about a 29-year-old, his gap based on the strength of his game is dwindled. His window to win is actually in decline.